Still crazy. Still crazy. Still crazy after all these years.
Hello and welcome to the Not Ready for Primetime podcast. We're Gary Seath and Brad Robinson.
And you're not.
Today, Brad, we're watching Season 1, Episode 2 of Saturday Night Live, hosted by Paul Simon. Originally aired October 18th, 1975. And the musical guests on this episode are Randy Newman and Phoebe Snow.
Gary, I have to ask you a question.
Please do.
Do you like Paul Simon?
He's okay.
Follow-up question.
Yeah.
Do you really like Paul Simon?
He's okay.
This may not be an episode for you then.
Yeah, I noticed that. I'm not an hour and a half worth of Paul Simon kind of guy, but I got through this nonetheless.
It's like live from New York. It's the Paul Simon show.
Yes.
Dun, dun, dun.
It's the Paul Simon Variety Hour.
Fair.
Right? It's a totally unique episode, I think, in the history of Saturday Night Live.
I don't think they've ever done one like this again.
No. And it is the Paul Simon musical hour. It's so many songs, so much Paul Simon. The musical guests, Randy Newman and Phoebe Snow, each play one song.
Right. Oh, right. And because she sings with him on a song.
Right. As opposed to last week where the two musical guests each played two songs. Maybe they thought that was too much, but this was a musical show.
Yes. Obviously highlighted by the Simon and Garfunkel reunion.
And that was a big deal for this episode, right?
I mean, this was the first time they were together in like 6-7 years. I think it was. It
was interesting. Like they had the whole montage before they introduced Art Garfunkel and.
Yeah, it was weird.
Yeah. It was you can say that about the entire episode. It was weird.
It was. And it's interesting, like why they choose to do this. I mean, obviously Paul Simon's a friend of Lorne Michaels and coming into this. So you knew there was going to be some kind of a now you know this, that there's going to be some kind of a Paul Simon episode and very Paul Simon centric, but it's like very weird to go so heavy on Paul Simon and so little on your cast. So little, in fact, that most of them are only on screen for 30 seconds. There is a version of the story of why this is that Lorne wanted to give the writers a break after, a stressful week one and trying to get all that stuff together for week one, that like pull the reins back a little bit and give them a break for week two, which the writers I'm sure loved. But meanwhile, the cast is like, what the fuck? Sure. Well, the writers, I mean, they did have to write 72 sketches for the first show. So maybe they did need a break. I guess. I mean, and as we've said, they are still in real time figuring out what the show is. Right. I don't think they ever thought the show would be a musical variety show, but in the efforts of let's really see what works and what doesn't work, doing a music episode isn't the worst thing to do, episode 2, especially something like this, which has such a popular following of Paul Simon and Garfunkel reuniting. Like, when you stop and actually think about it a little bit, like, okay, it's not that far out in left field. No, I guess not. It's just not a funny show, which is what you spent. It's not. You spent all this money on writers and cast of comedians, and for your second episode to be no comedy, minimal comedy. Like, I think it's just all about pacing a little bit more for the content of what you're creating. It's like you do episode 1, and then this week is like a little bit of a pullback for the writers. So they have 2 weeks to come up with material for episode 3, and then you take your week off after episode 3. So then you have another 2 weeks. So as far as creating comedy content, you really wait, what is that now, 6 weeks? Yeah. 5 weeks, I guess, until you're trying to now produce new stuff every single week. So it's kind of that like slow ramp up, I guess. Yeah. I'm just trying to justify why you would do Paul Simon week 2 of your brand new sketch variety show. Yeah. I mean, I obviously don't agree with it, but
for me, I'm like, oh, I would wait for that week off till later in the season, because to your point, you have all of this ramp up time. You can hopefully produce 2 shows worth of material in the few months that you had, regardless of like all of the moving parts, right? Because they obviously even
I don't know if you can though, because if your show is host driven and you have a new host every week, how much can you do in advance prior to that host?
Well, this pre-tape was pre-taped before the week of.
What pre-tape?
The basketball pre-tape.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, again, this is one of those things. It's so easy to go back in time and be like, how would you do this? But like at the time, it's like, we've got Paul Simon. He's going to reunite with Art Garfunkel. Right. What a better way to like promote our brand new late night show
than having Simon and Garfunkel on.
Yeah. Like, they were huge in the 60s, 1970, whenever they broke up. So it was like a big deal,
I guess.
But looking at it in the construct of Saturday Night Live, or what we come to know as Saturday Night Live, yes, it's a very weird episode.
Yeah.
But for all of that, and as much as it's weird and doesn't make sense, this show wins an Emmy.
Okay. So explain that to me.
Well, so the television, if you have shows on television, you can get nominated to win an award, and it's called an Emmy Award.
Yes. No, not that
and
part.
They have many different categories. This show will go on later this year for other episodes to win other Emmys.
Their little statuettes.
This particular
chocolate wrapped in gold foil.
I can't bite through this. But for this episode, Dave Wilson wins. Dave Wilson wins for Best Directing Variety Show for the Paul Simon concert. I never realized it prior to my most recent watching. Looking before, it always felt like a variety show. And then when I watched it again this time, now having dug deeper and learned about the Emmy, you can totally see it. And it makes sense because the whole episode is performances, and it's very calm performances. Singer-songwriter, you're sitting on a stool, you're standing with a guitar, you're on the piano. So for the week, all they have to do is figure out their camera moves and work stuff out and fix the audio, which they did after episode 1 too. It does sound better, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But so you're not spending your week as a director figuring out blocking and where to put cameras and how to make sketches work. You've got to figure out, okay, Randy Newman sits at a piano for 3 minutes. How do we cover it? Simon and Garfunkel sit on stools next to each other for 5 minutes. How do we cover to make it look cool? And so you can totally tell those things are played off well. And then again, as we said, this reunion's a big deal. So like, I don't know if your son's around and can give us a good example of like what a duo today would be reuniting, like Outkast.
I mean, that's
pretty good, right?
Look, it's better than I thought you were going to come up with. So yeah,
I spent all afternoon trying to figure out that reference. Oh yeah.
All right.
No, it doesn't work. Okay.
No, it works better than what I was afraid you were going to come up with. Well, I guess the reunion is a big deal. So I understand it more. Thank you.
And Paul Simon, I think, is a big deal, sadly, at this point still.
I guess so. I mean, yes, he definitely is, right? This is probably the height of his solo career, or about the height of his solo career.
At least the early part, until it goes downhill until Graceland. Yeah.
Right.
Like this is 70s prime. He'll go down for a little bit and then he's gone for almost a decade, probably until the mid 80s when he does Graceland.
And then he marries Edie Brickell. All right. Regardless of that, should we get into this episode? Dive in?
We must.
All right. So cold open, a show staple.
It is cold. It opens cold.
It is Paul Simon singing Still Crazy after all these years. Just him on stage with a spotlight. It's a little awkward. To me, he looks like he's dressed as a college professor.
That doesn't bother me. It's the 70s. I mean, it's fine, but I agree. It did feel weird to me. And I know it's the cold open, but it just fades in.
Yeah.
And an organ starts playing and he's there on the stage. That to me did feel odd. But yes, he comes in, he plays the title track of what will be his new album, which isn't even out yet. I think his album comes out the next week or 2 weeks later. So he comes out and plays a song that no one's ever heard of yet.
And it is not an upbeat, like, let's get you in the mood for a fun show song.
No, but it's good. Yeah. Did you not enjoy it?
No, it's
like, it's a good song.
Yes, it's good. Yes. I'm just saying, last week, right? People still don't know what the show is, but let's assume that a viewer tuned in last week, watched Billy Preston, saw a bunch of the sketches, and they're like, okay, I'm getting into this show. And then you tune in at 11:30 on a Saturday night. It's not like this is early in the evening. And then you see this.
I think you're misjudging what the early 70s were like, or mid 70s. I do. Like, I think this is a big deal, and people were excited to tune in and hear Paul Simon play a brand new song that you haven't heard yet.
All right. Okay. All right.
Off of what will eventually be like one of his biggest albums. It has like 4 top 40 hits. He ends up winning 2 Grammys this year for Album of the Year and Best Pop Performance. So it's like, he's a big deal. He has a new album, which is going to be a big deal.
Right.
And I think opening with a brand new track makes sense.
That's ballsy.
I thought it sounded pretty good, or at least better.
It sounds way better than the musical performances last week did. Again, it's just him singing. It's a very mild, very quiet band singing behind him. A nice sax solo.
David Sanborn.
Mm-hmm. And then as he wraps up his song, this is the part that caught me about the directing. Chevy walks across stage with a guitar as if he was part of the band and does a pratfall over a bunch of chairs.
Well, that's the first thing I noticed too. When they go back and they go wide and the home base lights up a bit.
Yep.
Is you see the folding chairs. Like, that's the first thing that caught my eye, was when I laughed that the folding chairs were just set out there.
They're just sitting there, empty stage, bunch of folding chairs, perfect for a pratfall.
And we get Chevy's first pratfall.
His first pratfall into Live from New York. It's Saturday night,
which is something he had always wanted to do, but he had wanted to do this in episode 1, and Dick Ebersol did not want it to happen, so they didn't do it. But the whole pratfall Live from New York was a gag Chevy wanted to do, and they didn't do in episode 1, and for whatever reason they convinced him to let him do it in episode 2, and the rest is history.
Everybody seems to love it after this.
Yeah, well, I mean, it makes sense too, because episode 1 he just walks out nonchalant and says it, so like he can't do it again. Like, you need to do something different. So what's different? Make a fall, and he's going to be the physical comedian. So I think it made sense to try it in episode 2 after you did the nonchalant episode 1 version.
Yeah. And then in the opening credits, the only things I saw were George Coe is no longer listed in the primetime players, but neither is Michael O'Donoghue in this episode.
Yeah, they're both gone in this one. And they also list everybody alphabetically this time. Episode 1, I don't know what the order of the names were, if they're like what the reasoning behind was, but it wasn't alphabetical. This one, at least, it's alphabetical. And yes, no George Coe, Michael O'Donoghue. Michael O'Donoghue's name will come back for a little bit later on. But yeah, the band sounds better.
The band sounds,
the opening the opening song, the opening intro, at least for this episode 2, sounds a little bit more polished, a little bit more fun, a little bit more energy to it.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. And then we fade into our monologue. The monologue this episode is Paul Simon on stage with the Jesse Dixon Singers. I'm not familiar with the Jesse Dixon Singers. They sound great when they start singing, and they look beautiful. What caught me was Paul Simon introduces them. He introduces each of the female singers and then introduces Jesse Dixon, and then sticks his hand out and gives him this awkward 5. Like, give me 5, man. Love those 70s 5s.
It also felt weird, like he was just there. Like, we fade in, the host is already standing there. There's no entrance, but I guess we just saw him in that same spot for the cold open. So why is he going to run off and come back on? But it was interesting to come in from the opening credits, and the host is already there, standing there.
Art Garfunkel does the walk through the crowd later, but Paul Simon's just there with this group, and they sing "Love Me Like a Rock." It sounded great. I really enjoyed this number.
Yeah, I mean, it's because I think of the backup band and of the Jesse Dixon Singers is probably why, because they definitely add a lot to it. This is a song from his "There Goes Rhymin' Simon" album from a few years ago. I think it got up to number 2, if I remember correctly, my research, number 2 in October of 73. Yeah, it's a fun song. It was also fun to see him. I feel like this is the first time on the show we've really gotten a good look of what we've come to know as like home base.
Yeah.
Like the basement down the stairs, home base. I mean, they used it in episode 1 a little bit. I think Janice Ian played there, but you didn't really like notice it or take note. I felt this performance is the first time you actually get to see what we then know and equate with kind of home base for the early years.
It just feels so small, and it looks small.
Oh, I didn't think. Yeah, I don't know. It didn't feel too small to me. This felt for me the first time of like, here's Saturday Night Live. Here's a performance. This is what it looks like. This is what I remember it being or looking like.
Right. It was also jarring to me to see the backup singers, like the two women that are on camera right of Paul Simon, just seem to be towering over him. And then when you see them later in the episode, they're the same height as Jesse Dixon. It's just that Paul Simon is so short.
You should see him standing next to Connie Hawkins.
Exactly. But I thought this was a great performance.
Oh, now you like Paul Simon.
No, I like this performance.
You're like,
I like the Jesse Dixon Singers.
The uncredited singers.
Yes.
Who I like.
The Jesse Dixon Singers, who I, before watching this episode, I'm not sure that I had heard of them prior.
Oh, no way.
After that lovely number, we get our first pre-tape of the night, which is Rubin's Wallpaper.
This is so interesting.
It's a commercial parody with Jerry Rubin, former Yippie leader.
Yes, this is all true. Keep going.
And he's selling wallpaper.
Correct.
That is graffitied with all of the anti-war, all of the 60s activist catchphrases that he was known for as part of the Yippies.
Right. It's so interesting. They're still not pumping in audience reaction. So I feel like, especially for this, I know he's not a performer, but I really missed him being able to play off a laugh. There's points in this where it's just dead air and like a laugh, or even just him reacting to a crowd reaction would have been good. But it's a very interesting piece. I mean, especially now looking back on what we know, everything you said is true. Continuing, he then goes on to become like this like big Wall Street like businessman in the 80s. Yeah. It's like 60s radical turns into hip capitalist, like foreshadowing all of that.
Totally. Like 1000%. Like he becomes basically the poster child for hippies turned yuppies. He even went on tour with Abby Hoffman in the 80s and did a yuppie versus yippie debate.
Yeah. The debates. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a guy who was known for creating the Youth International Party, the Yippies, where yippie came from. Right. And so the term yippie came from. And it's just very interesting to like find him in this weird time, I guess, in his life where like he's making that change from counterculture icon to 80s businessman.
Yeah.
What made me laugh most about this sketch is not this sketch, but a Norm Macdonald bit on Weekend Update.
I was going to bring that up.
Where he's like, yippee, Jerry Rubin died this week. Oh, punctuation. Like
he's like,
it's
I'm
one
sorry.
of the best.
Yeah, it's
one of the best Norm Macdonald bits. It's just, I'm sorry. Like that.
It's funny because as soon as I saw him, I was like, wait a minute, this rings a bell. And I recently saw that bit of Norm Macdonald. Yeah.
But the sketch is interesting.
The sketch is interesting. Yeah.
The commercial is interesting. It's funny. And I think it holds up better than I think they ever thought it would, just based on what Jerry Rubin ends up doing for the rest of his life. So
yeah. No, I think that's true. There were a couple of things with the sketch that I was like, oh, this is like, you didn't need to see him unrolling in the wallpaper. It got a little unwieldy and awkward, but
that's why I feel like if there was an audience reaction, if he was doing it live, they would have laughed at that.
Right.
And he probably would have reacted to that and played off of it or like laughed at himself,
right.
Which I thought would have made it even funnier. It would have been a better bit.
Yeah.
If it was live, like those kind of things would have been a nice touch. And then at the end, we get the first audience cryon.
Chiron.
Am I saying it
No,
right?
you said cryon. It
is a cryon.
It's a Chiron.
It's a cryon.
You're a cryon.
We get our first one of those.
Yes.
Which I find humorous. I think it's a nice way that, in those early years, SNL would like still incorporate the jokes and keep things going that you didn't normally see. So it was fun to see that when the good friend of David Eisenhower
yes.
in the audience.
Again, counterculture reference, making fun of someone for being friends with David Eisenhower. But it worked. I'm with you. That Chiron was a good one.
Okay. Pardow.
Pardue.
Pardow. It was funny.
Yeah. Back to our friend Paul Simon singing a Randy Newman number, Marie.
Little obscure number. Yeah.
It is an obscure number.
The
it's
song.
also very short. And basically, it just serves as an introduction to Randy Newman.
Yes. It's a great Randy Newman song.
It is a great Randy Newman song. Paul plays it by himself with acoustic guitar, and then literally just goes and introduces Randy Newman. That's it. That's all this is.
Yeah. And Randy Newman does Sail Away, which is another great Randy Newman's great. I don't know. I very much am a Randy Newman fan.
I love Randy Newman. I think if we could have split this show, half Paul Simon, half Randy Newman, I would have been a lot happier.
I definitely could have used another Randy Newman song.
Randy Newman, another friend of Lorne Michaels.
Yeah. He'll end up being a musical guest 5 more times on the show, as well as the New Orleans episode for Mardi Gras.
Right.
And of course, co-writer of Three Amigos.
Yes. It's amazing. I love that fact. That's one of my favorites.
But no, back to the song Sail Away, title track from his 1972 album. It's another great album, another great song. I mean, it's interesting if this is his one song he plays and it's Sail Away, a song that's kind of making fun of white Americans selling slaves to come on ships to America. It's kind of bold.
Yeah.
Kind of ballsy. I mean, I think you lose a lot of that in his folksy, all shucks, Randy Newman persona. But like many of his songs, there's other meanings and they're usually insulting to someone. But I thought it was good.
No, I think it was good. It was a good choice. I liked it. I thought it was appropriate for this show and what they were going for.
I think he should have played a second song and it should have been Rednecks. It would have been great.
I'm a big fan of short people.
He probably couldn't play it because Paul Simon was on the show.
Oh, that's good. That's true.
If it was even written then. I don't know if it was written then or not.
I don't think so. I used to play that song for my kids when they were little.
Short People's 80s, isn't it?
I think it's later 70s.
Yeah, it might have been. It probably wasn't written. Also, he probably wasn't going to be allowed to play it because of Paul Simon.
That would be hilarious if we find out that's why. Short People didn't come out until 1977, though. So,
you know who else is really excited to have Randy Newman on?
Who's that?
The Cast, because that offered them 30 seconds of television time.
Yeah, the cast then after Randy Newman's number comes out dressed as the Bees. Not all the cast, by the way. Chevy's not here.
He's not.
But there's
who that is?
No. Is it Elliot Gould?
No. Friend of the pod, Neil Levy, is back.
Oh, all right.
And I wonder, is it because he was in Update Next and didn't want to do the change over so quick?
I'm sure.
Not that it's that hard, I feel like, to change out of a bee outfit. Or did he dislike the bees that much that he was like, fuck you?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
Is he in other bee sketches this year? I guess we'll see. Don't give it away. Don't answer my question. We want people to tune back in.
Stay tuned to track the number of times we see Chevy in or not in a bee outfit.
Oh my goodness. I'm really sorry. The bees number is cut. What? Ah, shucks. It didn't work last week. It's cut. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's just weak. I don't know. I also felt it was almost too early in the show for this gag.
I guess, but when you look at the way the rest of the show's laid out, this was the only opportunity for a live bit with Paul Simon, because every other time
I guess so.
He's singing.
Oh, right. Yeah, he's singing, or he's always with somebody or introducing somebody. So yeah, I guess it makes sense. And they didn't want to mess up the Art Garfunkel bit, so
right.
That makes sense. But it's funny, as much as the cast hated the bees, apparently the network did as well. I mean, the whole reason I think we got the bees this episode, so the one note Lorne Michaels got after episode 1 from the network was lose the bees. So of course the first thing they go do is figure out a way to put the bees into a Paul Simon episode. And you know what? You watch it close because it's the only time you can watch the cast. Belushi's still great. Like, he does a classic Belushi shrug.
Yeah.
Where he like walks off, which it's still funny. It's really good for his 5 seconds he's on screen today.
Yeah, it is just so weird that it is the only time we see the cast. Dan's the only one that says anything. He says all shucks. But yeah, you're right. Belushi's like,
he's making the most of what he's got.
Well, making the most of what they got is Chevy Chase in Weekend Update, in what I assume is the shortest Weekend Update of all time.
Yeah. How long is this one?
Would guess. How long do you think this was?
Obviously not including basketball.
Yeah, not including. This is
90 seconds.
It's 98 seconds, but
I was close.
The last 10 seconds is the setup to basketball. So yeah, he has a couple of good jokes, mostly about Gerald Ford, car accidents.
Do you notice him going to pick his nose when he hangs up the phone?
Yeah.
That was pretty good.
Yeah.
Nice subtle. It was good.
Yeah. No, I liked that open where they introduce Chevy Chase and he's on the phone with somebody and doesn't realize that the camera's there and then starts to pick his nose and then realizes he's on camera. That's good.
I mean, there's what, 4 jokes? 3 Gerald Ford jokes, a Muhammad Ali joke, and then we get into it?
Yeah. Yeah. The Muhammad Ali joke leads into the intro for the longest pre-tape of the night, which I thought was really good.
I thought most of it was good. It got long. The interview at the end was a bit long.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
Up till then, it was good. But the lead-in was great. Paul Simon's actually pretty funny. Connie Hawkins is good. It is a pretty good bit. It did get a little long at the end.
Yeah. So the whole bit is that Connie Hawkins challenges Paul Simon to one-on-one because he heard that Paul Simon was a good schoolyard basketball player.
And Connie Hawkins, obviously a good schoolyard player. So throw down.
They have the whole thing introduced. The whole thing starts with an interview with Marv Albert.
Yep. Who at the time was the Knicks broadcaster doing radio and TV for the Knicks.
Yeah. Longtime Knicks broadcaster before he.
Fun fact, You'll appreciate Marv Albert was also at this time calling New York Giants games.
Oh, really?
On the radio. Yeah.
Nice.
Second fun fact, Marv Albert would be accused of sexual assault in the late 90s.
Yes. That was a bad one. Yes. I'll have to work on that. But the interview he does with Paul Simon, to your point, I think Paul Simon was really funny in this. He shows him, he's like, what number are you wearing? He's like 0.02. It's always been my number. I wore that in high school.
It's just so offhanded. It's always been my number. Yeah.
I noticed in looking at your uniform, the number decimal point 02. Any particular significance to that?
No, it's always been my number. Ever since junior high school. It's not Connie's number. I don't think there'd be any confusion between us.
Paul, what is your game plan for the Hawk?
Well, I'm spotting him a 1 foot 4 inch height advantage, and I have to be honest, that's going to be a factor in this game. He's got me on speed and shooting ability, but I just have to play my game as I usually play it. And I mean, I'm not going to change anything. I got to stay with my strengths, basically singing and songwriting.
Okay. It's funny you talk about, it's obviously pre-tape. You can hear the audience laughing on this, which I think is the first time they've actually let not that they were watching it, recording it live, but you actually heard the audience react to a pre-tape for the first time, which is weird, kind of interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely works better.
Yeah. There's a lot of good lines in there. He asked Paul Simon, what are you going to do? And he's, stay with my strengths, singing and songwriting.
It's good. And then Paul Simon hits a few shots, though.
Paul Simon's got some game. Right? He's not that bad, actually.
No. And obviously, Connie Hawkins was throwing some shots up to miss, but Paul Simon was playing well.
No, Paul Simon made some shots. He had some moves. I was kind of surprised.
And he's left-handed. That caught my attention because he kept going to the left. And then he mentions it later.
He mentions it at the end, which is actually, I think, a great callback.
Yeah.
To end the night. It's really good. They pick a good song. The Julio down at the schoolyard is very fitting.
Right. Talking about being schoolyard basketball players. And then the whole thing is played over top of me and Julio down by the schoolyard.
Yeah. And it's fun. I mean, they do some great stuff in it with when he gets fouled and then he pretends to be hurt and they put he's not really hurt. That's great. It's really funny. They do a great job. And then the end where it's in slow-mo and he almost goes for a pump fake and you see Connie Hawkins literally jump over Paul Simon before he makes the winning basket.
Yeah.
It's great. Like I said, the end interview just got a little bit, for me, too long.
I agree. No, I agree with that. But the basketball bit was great. It was a lot of fun.
It was great. It worked really well.
And that was, it's not our last pre-tape of the night, but it is one of the funnier bits of the night, just because there weren't that many funny bits.
No, as we will, I'm sure, mention later. But yeah, it was refreshing to watch comedy for a little bit.
It was refreshing to watch comedy because coming up is a very sentimental reunion with Art Garfunkel and Paul Simon.
This is it. The big highlight, what everybody was tuning in for.
And the whole thing starts, they come back from commercial, and it's a photo montage of young Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel.
Which I thought was okay, I guess, but like went way too long.
Yes.
And I also got to ask, why do you not have a cast member, even if it's Chevy, which it probably would have been? Why don't you have somebody introduce this? Like, this is an example to at least show somebody on the cast speaking.
Yeah.
Like, have them introduce Paul Simon and Garfunkel. Like, I don't know. I felt like a missed opportunity to showcase somebody on your cast.
Especially the second episode. And then Art walks down through the crowd like George Carlin did the first episode.
I call it pulling a Carlin, yes. Coming down from the rafters.
I think that's the only time anyone has referred to anything that Art Garfunkel does as pulling a Carlin.
I don't know, but now I'm intrigued to see how many more times this happens.
They walk through the crowd?
Because I thought for sure like that was a one and done, George Carlin coming from the upper deck. And then here we are, episode 2, Art Garfunkel does it. So I cannot wait to see who does it next.
And they joke around a little bit when Garfunkel sits down.
No, hold
on.
There's Paul Simon's an asshole.
Oh, so because of this, the joking around?
There's not joking. I actually want to know how much of that was actually done in dress, that Art Garfunkel would then come back out on television and let that pipsqueak talk to him like that.
So you didn't think it was very nice?
I did not think it was very nice. You didn't think it was
good-natured?
No.
Oh, all right.
I did not think that was good-natured at all. I thought he was being a total asshole.
Okay.
But I guess but see, I think that's part Paul Simon. You know what this reminded me of? There's a sketch in season 12 where he's the musical guest, and he does a sketch where he's standing in line. I think it's with Jan Hooks.
Yeah.
You ever see this?
Yeah.
And all these people, they're inside. Okay, so the sketch is he's standing in line to see a movie with somebody, and all these people walk by him, and he's Paul Simon, and they're like, "Hey, I bought your album, and I had a scratch." Like, he knows all these random people walking down the street, like, "Oh, your mother was sick. How's she feeling?" And then someone talks to him how he bought an album, and he's like, "Oh, it had a scratch on it. Did you ever get that fixed?" And they're like, "How do you know all these people, the date that he's with?" And then Art Garfunkel shows up as an unannounced cameo, and the whole joke is he has no idea who he is.
Right.
It's like, again, if you're Art Garfunkel, how is that funny for you? Like, why do you want to do that? And it just, I don't know, it was just reminiscent of this, where you're like, I feel like he was just doing it to show that he's better and to really just like twist a knife into it. I don't know. Thought it was kind of a dickhead.
That the comment about movies,
it's a total dig.
Yeah.
Art Garfunkel, in theory, was like they had broken up because he wanted to do movies, and now he's basically making fun of him that like, oh, your career went nowhere.
No more movies.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, then they sing The Boxer
from their last album together, the last time they were happy.
Well, hey, they can still both sing. Like, they still sounded good together.
100%. They sounded excellent. 2 guys and a guitar. Sounded fantastic.
I believe at one point Garfunkel even goes, 2-part harmony, nothing better.
Yeah. See, which to me was a subtle fuck you, but I guess I misread it.
No, maybe. Look, I know you love the drama, so I'll give it to you. This was all the drama.
I mean, great song, The Boxer. Everyone loves it. And Paul Simon go on to play it again on SNL when he came on after the first episode after 9/11.
Oh, yeah.
And they opened the show and he played The Boxer. And I think he's one of very few artists to play the same song more than once on the show.
Interesting. I forgot about that.
I know. Yeah. I know Foo Fighters did it semi-recently with Times Like These. And Coldplay, I believe, did it with Yellow. I don't know if there's anybody else, but that's where the same artist plays the same song on different episodes.
Yeah. So they go right from The Boxer to Scarborough Fair. Again, they sounded great.
I don't like this song.
I mean, I understand why you wouldn't.
Why is that?
Because you don't like herbs.
Rosemary,
thyme,
sage.
Parsley, sage.
I mean, it was a popular song. It was off their album, 4 Condiments at a Deli Stand. And then it was re-released in 68 because it was on The Graduate. And that's when it came out as a single and was, I think, a top 10 hit or just outside the top 10. So obviously it's a popular song, but I'm watching this and I'm wondering, I can't imagine going to a Simon and Garfunkel concert. Like, it's got to be, I like listening to them. I can put them on the radio and listen, but like to go and sit and watch the two of them, I don't get that.
I mean, that's what you're doing here for like.
Right. I made it 2 songs before I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
Thank God they went to commercial.
Yeah, they go to commercial after Scarborough Fair and then they come back and they don't change anything.
For more. We need more.
They come back and sing My Little Town, the two of them together.
So this is another new song that's actually credited to Simon and Garfunkel. And it shows up on both of their upcoming solo albums.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So we said, Paul McCartney.
I wish it was a Paul McCartney variety show.
I know. So we said Paul Simon has the Still Crazy album coming out in like a week or so. And then I think a month after that, Art Garfunkel has a new album, and both of their albums has this song on it. And it becomes a top 10 single for them. It gets released. It becomes, I think, number 9. It's like number 1 on the adult contemporary. So like this is a big deal. And especially this, because I think this is the only performance they do as like a duo to promote it.
Interesting.
All of that said,
yeah,
not a good song.
No, I don't.
Not good.
I didn't really like it.
The only thing that might have been worse than this song was when they come back the next time and they let Art Garfunkel sing by himself.
Oh, I disagree. I think My Little Town is worse than I Only Have Eyes for You.
Were we at somebody's wedding? I could have sworn I was at somebody's wedding. Why else do you play that song?
Because I don't know. I got nothing. This was...
No, you must have something. You thought it was great.
No, I didn't. Wait, I think we want to replay that tape because I did not say that. I said it was better than My Little Town. I'll stand by that. Maybe
his version? Because this is a cover.
Right.
It's a cover of a cover, actually. I don't think it's a cover of a cover.
I mean, how does that work? Like, can't it just be another person doing a cover? How is it a cover of a cover? I'm sorry.
Well, it's a cover. I think what I'm trying to say is I think the most widely known version of this song is the one from the 50s, which in itself was a cover from a song from the 30s. So that's what I'm getting at.
Right.
I have a better question for you.
Okay, good.
Do you think during this performance at this time, is the cast still in the studio?
No.
Or have they gone home?
I think they're gone. There's no reason for them to stay, right?
This is what I'm wondering. These are the thoughts I'm having during this performance. I'm like, I wonder if the cast is still there. They all went home. Or went to the party.
They went out.
Started the after party.
Yeah, they went out. But no, I think they're probably gone. I was wishing that I was gone at this point in the show. I also, part of the reason I think I liked the Art Garfunkel solo is I was having Paul Simon fatigue.
Speaking of fatigue.
Yes. The only remaining live bit that's not a musical number left in the show is the Muppets.
And I'm actually happy to see this. The feeling doesn't last long, but when the Muppets came on, I was actually happy to see them.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I was actually a little disappointed that they were so short because they were so long last week. This week, they're only like 3 minutes long. And I was like, no, stretch it.
Well, to me, this made less sense than last week, which I didn't think was possible. So like my only saving grace to this by the end was that it felt shorter.
I mean, it's just shtick.
It's shtick. And it actually started out well. Like, they're making fun of New York City, obviously, when New York City was about to default and had no money. And this was like, I think 2 weeks maybe before the famous Gerald Ford alleged quote New York City dropped dead.
Yeah.
So like, I was like, okay, maybe this is going to be funny. Like maybe this is a Franken and Davis piece, which is going to be actually witty. And then no,
it wasn't. It was just a really awkward, weird Muppet sketch.
But at least it was short.
At least it was short, I guess. Then we come back to Paul Simon. He introduced a film by Albert Brooks as another regular feature of the Saturday Night Show, a film by Albert Brooks.
Before we're forced to talk about Albert Brooks again, let's take a moment, if we may. Paul Simon actually does a pretty good job as a host, comparative towards George Carlin, where he actually does introduce a lot of people. He's very much guiding us through the night. Here's this, here's that. Like, I got to give him a little credit for that.
I thought it was interesting, too. Whenever he did introduce a musical number, a musical guest, he would tell you what number they were singing.
Well, much like Albert Brooks, he wants you to think he's the smartest person in the room. So that's why he did that. See also Conversation with Art Garfunkel.
Although his introduction of Phoebe Snow was a little awkward, but we can talk about that when we get to Phoebe Snow.
Is it because he was scared because she was with child and didn't know what to do? He was very put off.
He like touched her belly awkwardly. He says something about her being 7 months pregnant. Something to the effect of, I think she's 7 months more pregnant than probably anyone else here, and then touches her belly. And you can tell that she's like, okay, I'm just going to sing my song.
So for those of us counting, he has now touched JD awkwardly in the opening song with him, Jesse Dixon.
Yes.
And now Phoebe Snow. So he's touching two people awkwardly.
Thank you for clarifying JD was Jesse Dixon, because that
He introduces him as
Yeah,
JD. Did you not
no,
pay attention? Like they're like obviously friends.
Oh, obviously.
Obviously they're friends.
Do we want to talk about this Albert Brooks film, or do we want to just move past it?
No, it's Albert Brooks. Let's talk about Albert Brooks.
I thought it was kind of funny when the little girl comes in and like the little girl's asking all these questions. He's like, "Oh, my daughter." And she asks all these questions and he's like, "It's a chair." He's like, "All right, get out of here." And he turns back to the camera after he has the cop take her away, and the cop flashes that he has a gun to the 6-year-old girl.
It's interesting that he does 2 films in a row with bits with little kids. I don't know. It stood out to me after the dating one from the first episode.
Yeah.
But again, his line is funny. You won't be seeing her again. Like he is funny. He does have moments. So I'll give him credit.
You'll never see her again. And then it's just kind of bits that are reminiscent of like his father.
Well, it tries to segue into home movies.
Right.
Which the bit over black I didn't buy. Didn't really work for me when the lights go out. And
well, that's the part that I was like, oh, this reminds me of Carl Reiner, Mel Brooks type comedy. Yeah. And then it goes to just showing home movies, some of which I thought
home movies are interesting. It's interesting, this whole setup.
I mean, they're not really his home movies, just so you know.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, it's weird. Just these clips, him narrating over clips of old home movies, quote unquote.
And again, there are great lines like when they push the baby down and he has the line about these are traumas you remember forever. Yes. And then he cuts to 6 years later when he goes to the bathroom by himself for the first time. And
the dad's trying to push his head down toward the toilet for some reason.
It's also funny that there's a film of the filming.
Yes.
Like it's not like these are his home movies that his dad's shooting. It's home movies of somebody else, of his dad trying to make home movies. So like, it's definitely funny. And then he goes, now again, I am not smart, so do the math for me on this. But then the second bit he does is, this is me losing my virginity. And he said it's like 6 years later. Yeah. So is he losing his virginity at 13?
Yeah. Well, there's the kiss.
Played by an adult Albert Brooks.
There's a kiss in there first, like that awkward kiss at the front door. Same thing. The dad's like hiding in the bushes to film his first kiss and the kid flips out. And then it goes to 6 years after that, I think, it's like he's like 15.
Yes, but the kiss, I think, is a few months.
Oh, really?
Like when you watch it, like the kiss was like, here's something a few months later. And then they cut, and he's like, 6 years later, I lose my virginity. And I'm sitting there doing the math. I'm like, so he's 13, but he's then played by real life Albert Brooks.
Who throws down his hat. And he's like, I never saw that hat again.
It was good. It was a little long though. I mean, which is, I think you can also, in watching this, tell this was the first one he did.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about this a little bit in episode 1, but it was too long, which is an issue they had with all of his films going long. But with all the stuff they put in episode 1, they flip-flopped because luckily he handed in the first 2. So Lauren pulled movie number 2 up and played that in. So that's why it feels a little bit weird here.
Yeah.
But we have yet to really get into talking about Albert Brooks in really long movies. So tune in to episode 3 for that one.
And then we come back to Paul Simon introducing Phoebe Snow awkwardly. Phoebe Snow is 7 months pregnant at this point. Paul Simon feels like he needs...
Is that what's awkward for you? Is that she's pregnant?
Well, it's the way in which he does it.
Oh, he feels awkward because she's pregnant. Is that what you're trying to say?
I think he made all of us feel awkward that she's pregnant when no one else felt awkward about it. And I don't think she cared until he mentioned it and she looks down because he mentions...
Oh, you're probably right.
He mentions that you may have noticed and she looks down and like... This woman is not that, like, she's not a huge pregnant woman. This is like, she's wearing a big shirt. So like, she doesn't necessarily look pregnant, Paul. And then he touches her belly. And the whole thing is just like awkward. All the credit to Phoebe Snow, who brushes it all off. And she does a great performance of No Regrets.
Yes, she sounds fantastic. I didn't love the song myself, but I'm not a big, 30s music fan. But yeah, she sounds fantastic.
Right.
She's great.
This is a Billie Holiday number, which is how he introduces it. She was great.
Phoebe Snow is great. And she'll return. Phoebe Snow will be the first musical guest to repeat on SNL. She comes back later this season.
Is this her band playing with them? Do you know?
I don't know who the band is. Yeah. I was trying to figure it out. I was trying to look it up. I don't know if it's hers or if it's his, like if it's, he who played on his album.
Right.
So I don't really know who it is because it's not the house band.
No.
I don't think it's the house band.
I don't think so.
I don't recognize any of the horn guys.
Well, it's the same sax player as the solo sax player.
That's David Sanborn.
Yeah, David.
But who wasn't in the band.
There's one guy, I don't know if he's the bass player. He's just smoking a pipe. Like he had like an old school pipe in his mouth.
Was it Duck Dunn?
It was not.
Wasn't Duck?
It was not Duck Dunn. No. Paul Simon then comes back because God forbid we don't hear from Paul Simon for more than 10 minutes.
You can actually see him if you look at the end of her song.
Oh, yeah.
He's off. You can see him on the side of the stage and he's like cueing the band to start the next number a little bit.
Oh, really? Guys, it's my turn to sing.
Guys. No, but they cut back wide at the end and you can see him on the right-hand frame and the piano player starts to do a little something, then you can see him kind of cue and then they kick into it. And then by the time they cut back to the front, he steps right next to her.
Then Paul Simon does come back after cueing the band and sings with her Gone at Last.
Well, she actually sings with him.
I guess that's
a
true.
Paul Simon tune.
Right.
It's on so this actually was released. This is also off his new album coming out, but this was released as a single by this point. So this, in theory, would have been the song off his new album you heard
Right.
of. Which both her and the Jesse Dixon Singers sing on. Yeah, they all sing on the actual recording as well. So it was cool they were all there.
Yeah. That was great. I thought this was like one of the better numbers of the night, just energy-wise.
Well, you don't like one person an instrument. I've noticed.
No, I do. I don't like Paul Simon singing acoustic by himself. That's not even that I don't like it. I just don't like
two-part harmonies. They're nice.
They're the best.
You're the best.
After Gone at Last is the final comedy bit of the night.
Generous, but continue.
It's a commercial parody for Try Hard, a battery wherein the whole premise of the bit is that they make these, I believe they called them geriatrics with pacemakers. Geriatrics with pacemakers is how they introduce them. And there are 5 of them. They come back in the morning and only one of them has any energy because his pacemaker battery is not dying.
I'm going to put money on what happened was they do the dress rehearsal and they're a little bit short on time. And they look around and they're like, what do we have left in our back pocket that we didn't use last week as far as pre-tapes?
Right.
And this was it.
Yeah.
The most interesting thing I could say about this is that I found it interesting that Don Pardo introduced it.
Yeah, he did.
Like, and now a film mess, which, I don't know, to me kind of gave away it wasn't actually trying to be a fake commercial that much. But that's all I got was Don Pardo introduced it. Next
we get more Paul Simon. I'm not sure if you knew that.
Oh, you must not be happy right now.
He comes back to sing for us by himself one more time, American Tune. What do you got on this song? Anything interesting?
It's another song off that Rhymin' Simon, one of my least favorite album titles. That was the end. That's all I got.
That's all you got.
That's it. That was it. Is that not enough?
No, that's more than enough. I think it's time to move on.
You.
It's time to move on to the good nights.
Another surprise guest.
Not Paul Simon, because he's definitely there. But then on walks current NBA star, New York Knick Bill Bradley, future Senator Bill Bradley, to present Paul Simon with a trophy that, no lie, is 3 inches shorter than he is.
I had in my notes, I felt like it was almost as tall as him. Yeah,
he puts it down at one point, and that's clearly a 5-foot trophy. Paul Simon is 5'3".
I mean, this is an interesting example because we already discussed he's funny in the basketball bit, and this is funny. Like him with the trophy when he almost hits Bill Bradley at one point, and like when he calls out Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, like he can be funny. And obviously he comes back repeatedly throughout the years and will host and do, special guest spots and show up. So he obviously is funny. It's a wonder then they didn't give him like just one sketch to do.
Yeah.
It's like the very, very few times they give him a chance to do something comedic, he does well.
The way he like tries to look around the trophy when he's like talking to the camera.
Yeah, it's all funny. It's like great physical humor. The jabs about Kareem, about going to his right, like don't watch, like don't let the video fool you. Like it's all really funny and well done.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Chevy gets a call out.
I was going to say that I had that in my notes that he thanks Randy Newman and Phoebe Snow and Art Garfunkel and Chevy Chase. But that was the show. That was it.
That was the show. Yeah. And then we get Don Pardo on the announcements announcing the Muppets, who did the Muppets, which was a cool shout out. And then he does his promo for the next week and starts what is somewhat of a reoccurring bit where he like repeats his name. Like, this is Don Pardo saying, this is Don Pardo.
Right.
Saying this is Don Pardo. Like he does that. Like, I think he changes it up in different variations throughout, but we get Don Pardo's sign off.
That was good. That was a nice end to the show.
I mean, it's a fun episode. Like, as an episode of television,
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. It was fun. It was well done. Obviously, as we said in the beginning, Dave Wilson, the director, wins an Emmy for it. It's technically produced and flows great. You've got big names happening with the reunion. So I could see being, late night, the fall of 1975, this episode being a big deal. It's just not a great episode of what, again, we will come to know SNL to be. That's all.
No, I know.
You have to look at it two different ways, I feel like. You look at it as a standalone bit, which obviously people did, and it holds up on its own. But when you look at it in the spectrum of what it is in Saturday Night Live, it's not there.
Right. No. And I don't think you can expect it to be there in the second episode.
No. And I do buy the theory of like, it's the idea to give people a break and give them like 2 weeks to get ready for the next episode, and for the writers and even some of the cast a little bit. I can, in watching it again, I can understand that idea.
Yeah. All right.
For as much as we talk about nothing really new in the SNL lore comes out of this, other than Chevy's fall in the beginning. The pictures we get of Paul Simon at the end were from his upcoming album, but the keynote is they were actually taken by Edie Baskin, who would then go on because of these photos, and Lauren liked them so much and how they worked well as like an advertisement. This is how she gets into the SNL world. And now all those iconic photos we know of cast members for this original run are done by her. So that starts from this episode. If we get nothing else from this episode, we get Edie Baskin and her photos that live on forever.
I think all in all, it is an interesting hour of television, hour and a half of television, to keep viewers engaged, I suppose. Again, not my cup of tea because I'm not a huge Paul Simon fan, but all in all, I think to your point, it does work as a collected piece of television. From there, Brad, what is your must-see bit for this episode?
I knew this question was coming, and you think I would have given it some thought.
You want me to ask it again?
No, I want to sit here and ponder.
Brad, time for must-see bits. What's your must-see bit, Brad?
I mean, the only bit is the Connie Hawkins bit.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I think.
I mean, you could say the Albert Brooks film. You could say the Muppets. You could say the Rubin wallpaper. You could say any of the songs.
Yeah. I go with the Connie Hawkins basketball pre-tape. And I mean, if I'm stretching for something, I would say the cold open, because I do like that song. It's a good song. It's done well. And it gets you Chevy's first pratfall.
Yeah, I think for me, it's definitely the basketball. I guess if I were pushed for something else, it would be the boxer, just because it's the first song that they sing with Simon and Garfunkel.
Yeah, I mean, it's an important thing. I get it, but
yeah,
oof.
It's not an easy episode to love.
Well, like anything else, as we've said, so much of an SNL episode, or very often, relies on the host, and if you like the host and how much you like the host. And I don't think that's any more obvious or prevalent than this episode. If you are a huge Paul Simon fan, you probably loved this episode and thought it was fantastic.
Yeah.
And if you hate Paul Simon, you probably hated this episode because there's not much else in there for you.
No, I think that's true. You really have to enjoy Paul Simon. And Lorne Michaels does really enjoy Paul Simon. And so that is why we got this show. Next week, we will watch episode 3 from season 1 of Saturday Night Live, hosted by Rob Reiner and musical guest No One?
Correct.
That'll be fun. And until then, good night and have a pleasant tomorrow.
Good night and have a pleasant tomorrow.